What's up everyone, welcome back to a brand new Resident Evil Village DLC discussion video type thing we've done for the past week now. This is going to be the last one for a major character in the game, and it's going to be Mia Winters, obviously Ethan's wife. Big character in terms of story point through 7 and 8 in a way. Not really in 8, obviously due to reasons, but either way, I believe her role in the game is a lot more important than what is shown in the game. If you don't know, from the events of 7 you find out that Mia is essentially working with this bioterrorist organisation called the Connections, and essentially Evelyn getting loose was her fault. She has every reason to be blamed for that, and she did work with bad people essentially. There's not a lot you really know about the Connections yet in terms of who they are, but I believe that is something that could be explored within the DLC idea for one, and then the other DLC idea I have is more of a horror themed one for Mia, because you find out later on in the game that she's alive and just being held captive by Miranda, so there's an idea floating around for that as well. So we're going to cover both sides and just kind of go into what they could be. Again, keep in mind, all of this will be, pre-game. Again, the events are already known, so you know what happens to these characters already, so there's no point doing a DLC set in the events of the game, because it all comes full circle in the main story, so it's set prior to all of that. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. So the first DLC I mentioned they could do was kind of like flesh out some more backstory on the group known as the Connections that Mia is involved with. They are obviously loosely talked about in Resident Evil 7, mentioned again more specifically in the Not a Hero DLC, which is free, so if you haven't played that for 7, I would recommend you do. It's a very interesting story point, and they're not really mentioned in 8 specifically. We do learn that Miranda was one of them, like she did work with them at one point, but then she went off to do her own thing. And that's all we really know about the Connections from Resident Evil 8. So what I'm thinking is, they do a kind of bridge DLC between 7 and 8 involving Mia, because obviously we know between 7 and 8, I think Mia, Zoe and Ethan were obviously kind of interviewed and questioned about what happened or what they saw. Mia is obviously very, very, very much involved with what happened, and she has kind of agreed to, help Chris in exchange for him obviously relocating them to Europe and kind of protecting them, because he wants to obviously take down the Connections and find out who they are. So what we could do is kind of, let's say for example, you have an opening cutscene where it's her and Chris sitting at a table in a room, kind of in an interview, and he's kind of asking her about the Connections and who they are and what they do. And while she's saying it, you could obviously take control of her, or she was with these people, and you would get an idea of not who they are, like maybe not any names, maybe some references, but just kind of like what they were up to and what they're doing and while they're doing what they're doing. Because very little is known. I'd imagine there'll be more detail about them in the next game, alongside the key story point with the BSAA at the end of Resident Evil 8, which I'll get into in a different video, because that's a whole video about that. But the Connections aren't really mentioned too much, and they do kind of imply to be set up as a big deal. Who they are, who they're related to, if it's any kind of reference to the original games, we don't know. Could be some kind of new form of umbrella. Obviously, again, speaking about these kind of like companies, there was the Blue Umbrella in Resident Evil 7, and that again seems to kind of just dissipate a little bit, because obviously you find out that through lore and through the Baker incident report that you get for getting the trauma pack for the game, that Chris has gone AWOL from the BSAA, so has his team. And at the end of Village, obviously this is all spoilers, but I would imagine you knew that already because this is a DLC video. At the end of Village, you find out the BSAA, when they came to the village to try and contain it, they were using bioweapons to do that, and obviously that's not their kind of, well, as far as we know, as far as what we've learned about them so far, That's not who they are. They are the anti-bioterrorism team. They are there to eliminate these bioweapons, not use them to beat other bioweapons. It's very weird and very out of character. But again, that's a whole thing to talk about in a separate video coming soon, because that could be a key story point for the next game and the potentially upcoming Resident Evil Outrage, the new Revelations game. So there were 2 videos about that. But anyway, yeah, Connections is the first one. Flesh them out, more detail, who they are, what they're doing, you know, just kind of give us an idea. Because the only thing we've seen with them is obviously Lucas was in contact with them, and you find that out in the Not Hero DLC. But you managed to stop their plans with him by taking him out and stopping the upload of like the crucial files. And the whole boat sequence in 7 where you're with Mia on the boat with the other guy that's part of the Connections. And that's all you really find out. Like, she was like a caretaker for Evelyn. Evelyn kind of got loose and that whole thing went down. Now, second idea would obviously take place again before the events of the game, but a bit closer to the events of the game. Obviously the gap between 7 and 8 is a few years, I'm pretty sure. Like 3 to 4 years possibly. Somewhere around that. But this could be finding out how Miranda infiltrated Ethan's house, how she managed to take Mia, and maybe some kind of horror element on how Mia escaped Miranda, or tried to escape Miranda, because she doesn't actually get away. But there could be some kind of escape plan attempted, or some kind of, you know, maybe they open up Ethan's house as a playable area again, and it's like a horror-esque kind of section where someone's in the house, and you don't know where or who they are. Something like that would be pretty cool, because I've said it before in these videos, the horror isn't in Village as much as it was in 7, but what there is of horror in Village is incredible. Obviously there's the whole Donna section with the creepy house and the, you know what comes up later on that chases you around the basement of the house. But that's where the horror kind of is, and don't get me wrong, there's a couple of spooky moments throughout the game, a couple of jump scares and stuff like that. But, you know, as we've all seen from that news story that came out around Village's release, they toned down the horror in Village because a lot of people said that Resident Evil 7 was too scary, which is weird. Like, I don't think it was that scary. It was definitely scarier than this one, but it wasn't too bad. But you gotta kind of appreciate it. At the end of the day, in terms of survival horror as a genre, Resident Evil is the most popular, and if, you know, if it's bearable, that's fine. But if it's too scary in terms of the horror in the game, the mass appeal will kind of decline because people don't want to play things that will scare them too much. Well, at least most people wouldn't, which I understand completely, so they toned it down a little bit. So maybe add some obviously paid DLC that is obviously optional. You don't have to buy any of the DLC if you don't want to. But maybe a couple of them, make them horror, and I feel like that's a good way to kind of make one. You know, just have Mia in her house being stalked by something. Obviously you find out it's Miranda, but that leads up to her being took, or again, flip that around and do a DLC where she's trying to escape Miranda's lab, and ultimately fails, of course, because obviously you save her later on as Chris. But yeah, both of those ideas are pretty cool in terms of location for horror, because Ethan's house is fairly big, and you could definitely change that up to be some kind of, like, take the Donna section for example, you know, add some hiding spots, some interactable things and stuff like that. Could be pretty cool, and it would be nice to kind of reuse that area because it's quite detailed and it's quite nice. But anyway, that's going to do it with the kind of Mia ideas I have for DLC. Obviously DLC is not going to be coming out for a few months still. I'd imagine we'll probably get some information at the end of the year, maybe on 1 or 2 DLCs will be out by then. In terms of how it will release, I do think the best way to do it would be how they did it with 7. Maybe do like bundles of smaller DLCs, like the band footages first, just to kind of give people something to do, and then release those bigger kind of story focused DLCs like Not Hero and End of Zoe from 7 later on separately. And you know, obviously they were a lot longer than the band footage DLCs. They were more story driven, they were like a couple hours and quite replayable. So I'd imagine we'll see something like that as well. And then I'd imagine hopefully we get some kind of band footage type DLC for this game, because I actually really enjoyed that. I really do want to play it through all again on YouTube, so I might do that soon. But yeah, this has been my mere ideas video. Let me know what you think about 2 ideas I've had. Obviously there is the Connections story so far is quite interesting. I'm very interested to see what they do with it, if they continue with it. And I'm very interested to see what they do with BSAA later down the line. And then again, just kind of seeing what happened with Mia when Miranda turned up would be interesting. So yeah, they're my 2 ideas. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any different ideas to that, or what you think of mine. And as always, leave a like if you enjoyed. If you are interested in Resident Evil content, I do upload every day. I stream every weekend, so there's something new every day. But again, completely optional. It's all up to you. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.